Cameras have captured strange beings, dark figures, and moments so unsettling they feel unreal. The deeper people look into these recordings, the stranger the details become, turning simple footage into something deeply unsettling. Staff at a recently occupied Singapore office were still settling into their new workspace when the ceiling light above them went out without explanation. Then a hand appeared through the surface above, nothing human in its features. It moved through the space below with the deliberate quality of something searching rather than exploring, sweeping slowly before withdrawing through the ceiling without completing whatever it had come to look for. The person filming noted that the team had only just moved in. Whatever had been above that ceiling hadn't waited long to make its presence known to the people now working beneath it. Dark creature. Footage shared across social media showed a white horse moving across open ground in visible panic, something pursuing it from behind. As the camera closed in, the pursuer came into focus dark, humanoid in shape, but built differently in one specific and deeply unsettling way. Its arms extended far beyond any natural proportion, and it used them as additional running limbs, driving itself forward with a speed that explained the horse's terror completely. The creature moved unlike anything with a straightforward biological classification. Relatives of the source reportedly gathered enough people to intervene and free the horse. Sky Witch. A woman driving her son to his school van in Beverly Hills noticed smoke forming in the sky above and pulled out her camera. Initially, it drifted and shifted the way atmospheric formations normally do. Then the shape it settled into became harder to look away from. Long, dark, disheveled hair, a body suspended with legs hanging freely in open air. The formation carried the outline of a woman with a clarity that exceeded what random drift typically produces. The witness connected it immediately to stories she had grown up hearing. Whether the sky had arranged itself into something ancient and recognizable, or something had briefly taken shape up there on purpose, the footage made pareidolia feel like an insufficient answer. Crying boy. A Colombian villager was pulled from sleep late one night by a child's voice outside his door, repeatedly asking to be let inside. The crying carried an urgency that should have produced sympathy, but instead produced the opposite, a mounting unease that grew heavier the longer the voice continued. He stayed inside and began recording rather than reaching for the door handle. The voice kept going, the tension kept building, and the villager remained where he was caught between the discomfort of ignoring what sounded like a child and the stronger instinct warning him that opening that door would cost him considerably more than a night's sleep. Only legs. A video from an actual working restaurant showed something that would have looked more appropriate on a stage during a magic performance. A table carrying food moved through a crowded dining area, supported beneath by what appeared to be a woman's legs in shorts and red heels, nothing above the waist visible at all. The legs navigated the crowd with fluid precision, pausing at exactly the right moments when guests reached for the platter, never making contact with anyone around them. The coordination exceeded what most people associate with a hidden person operating inside a contraption, but the alternative explanation required accepting something considerably harder to rationalize. Dust Guardian. Tourists filming near an African forest captured something moving through a dust formation that didn't behave like ordinary wind activity. It appeared dark against the surrounding air, twisting and shifting with a quality that felt guided rather than random, deliberate movements that a mindless atmospheric event had no business producing. Local people watching had a name for it already. They called it the Forest Guardian, a being from older stories said to carry authority over wind and open air. The creature danced through the dust with an almost ceremonial grace before dropping straight into the ground and disappearing entirely, leaving the air around it undisturbed, as though the whole encounter had never occupied that space at all. Closet Entity. Two friends entered an abandoned house in the early morning hours, with cameras running, moving through empty rooms that offered nothing unusual at first. The atmosphere shifted as they pushed further inside. Approaching a closet in one of the back rooms, one of them suddenly pulled away, as though something had taken hold of him, sharp enough to cause immediate panic in both. The other stepped forward and opened the closet fully. Nothing visible occupied it. Strange sounds began moving through the house shortly after, building steadily enough to make remaining inside feel untenable. One friend made it outside first and found the other already there, pressed behind a couch and visibly shaken. Neither of them went back in to finish what they had started. Door figure. A man experiencing repeated sleep paralysis episodes set up a camera, hoping to document whatever his mind kept insisting was present during those moments of frozen wakefulness. The footage, filmed from a low angle toward a partially open door, showed something peering through the narrow gap, shadowy, eyes faintly lit. Positioned exactly where the sensation of being watched always seemed to originate. Sleep paralysis is well documented as producing vivid perceptions of threatening presences. Whether the camera captured a genuine external figure or something generated entirely by a frightened and partially conscious mind is precisely the question the footage refuses to answer, which is why it kept circulating long after it first appeared online. Winged figure. A man filming the sky above an Indian city noticed something moving through the upper air that his eyes initially filed away as a large bird. Zooming in changed that reading entirely. The shape carried wings, but the body beneath them was humanoid, proportioned like a person, gliding with a steadiness that suggested neither effort nor turbulence. He maintained the footage was his own recording and not sourced elsewhere. Those who watched it found themselves without a clean category to place it in. Natural creature, experimental technology, or something that defied both explanations equally, none of the options closed the question fully. Temple demons. A tourist exploring Aokigahara Forest in 2012 came across a small temple tucked deep within the trees, its history clearly tied to practices that preferred isolation and darkness. What he recorded emerging from the shadows around it went beyond the atmosphere. Two figures appeared, both covered in black fur, both carrying faces that communicated nothing human. One stood completely still with a horn rising from its forehead, while the other moved forward. The temple's deep forest location suggested generations of deliberate concealment from outside eyes. Whether the entities had been drawn there by the rituals historically performed on that ground, or had simply never left after those practices ended, the footage offered no explanation. Crying girl. A man noticed a young girl sitting alone and crying and approached to check whether she needed help. She gave him nothing in return. No acknowledgement, no movement, no response to repeated attempts at conversation. She sat completely still, as though the words weren't reaching her at all. Growing more concerned, he reached out and made physical contact. That single touch ended the stillness immediately. Her head came up, and the face that turned toward him carried an expression that didn't belong to anything living unnatural, in a way that registered before he could articulate why. He stepped back sharply. In the moment that followed, she was simply gone. River Naga. A family fishing along a river in a remote Nigerian village pulled in something their net was never meant to hold. Among the catch was a creature carrying a human torso that transitioned seamlessly into a serpent's lower half, belonging to neither category cleanly. The family secured the net more tightly rather than releasing it, fearing what it might do to the village if it reached the water freely. Their caution wasn't enough. The creature broke through with a strength that left no room for further attempts. They identified it as the Naga, the half-human, half-cobra, being carried in regional legend, and watched it disappear back into the river. Room Watcher. Two friends arriving back at their residence looked up toward the building and found a figure standing in an upper window, looking straight down at them. Everything about its posture and appearance communicated immediately that it wasn't a person going about normal business inside.
Get awake in my face.
Something had either moved into that vacant space without invitation, or someone had gone to deliberate effort to access an empty room solely to stand at the window and watch these two specific people return. The figure did not attempt to step back or conceal itself while they filmed it from below. Village Shadow. A piece of footage from a rural Indian village recorded in 2007 continued attracting attention long after it first appeared. The clip showed a tall, shadowy form moving through the darkness, draped in dark clothing, its eyes carrying a faint glow against the surrounding night. Regional folklore describes spirits as entities that linger when a passing has been troubled or left unresolved, and viewers familiar with those traditions found the figure in the footage mapped onto those descriptions with uncomfortable accuracy. No confirmed explanation was ever attached to the recording. Moving tree. Something in this footage requires more than one viewing before it registers properly. A tree appears to be moving, not swaying with wind, not responding to any visible external force, but slowly and incrementally shifting its position toward the camera across the duration of the clip. The movement is subtle enough to dismiss on the first watch and impossible to unseen on the second. Legends describing trees capable of movement have existed across cultures for as long as people have been telling stories near forests. The unsettling thought the footage leaves behind isn't the movement itself, it's the speed. Window hand. A tenant who had recently moved into a rented house in Nicaragua had his first weeks there cut short around midnight when something reached through his bedroom window from outside. A hand, partially visible, pushed the frame open while he watched from across the room. He left the house immediately. Standing outside and looking back up at the building, the figure was now positioned in the window above him, looking down. Viewers who examined the footage described the face as something sitting between folklore and something older, features that didn't map cleanly onto any single cultural description, but carried the weight of several. Tree creature. A villager's dog erupted into frantic barking late at night, pulling its owner outside to investigate. He expected a stray animal at most. What the dog was staring up at was something perched in the branches above, shaped roughly like a bat at first glance, but carrying a humanoid face and a body that didn't resolve into anything familiar. Wings folded against its sides as it sat watching the dog below. Then it dropped from the branch, screeched directly at the animal, and returned to the tree in the same motion before disappearing into the darkness above. The man stood in his yard afterward, unable to identify what had just been sitting in his tree, staring down at his dog. Toilet entity. After moving into a student hostel, a young man began noticing something appearing in the same spot every time he used the bathroom, a figure standing and staring directly at him. The pattern repeated consistently. Each time he moved toward it to investigate, it disappeared completely, only to return once he settled back into his original position. The cycle continued long enough to shift his unease into something closer to obsession. Eventually, he set up his camera, wanting not just to document what kept appearing before him, but to zoom in afterward and finally understand what exactly had been standing there watching him night after night from the same unchanging spot. Forest creature. Two people filming deep inside a woodland area got more material than they had gone looking for when the ground ahead of them began moving. Something pushed through the surface and emerged that nobody present could immediately name. The people holding the cameras didn't run or scream. They simply stood and watched, which suggested the sight had bypassed the part of the brain that processes threats and gone somewhere quieter and more bewildering. Online viewers cycled through tentacle monster theories and stranger comparisons. What everyone agreed on, regardless of what they called it, was that nothing with roots should have been capable of moving the way that thing moved. Bay mystery.
No, Eddie, don't get excited now.
A group of friends fishing in Miami's Biscayne Bay on an ordinary weekend pulled up something that stopped the conversation entirely. The creature was jet black, covered in a slimy texture, with strange flaps, and an overall appearance that suggested nothing any of them had encountered before. They filmed it and released it, rather than keeping something that was unidentifiable on board. Online theories moved quickly toward extraterrestrial origins, or ocean mutation caused by dumped waste. Experienced fishermen eventually stepped in with a calmer identification common sea slug. The label settled the debate officially.
What the is this? What the is this?
Trees moving closer.
I'm gonna come back tomorrow and let's see if it drooped up a little bit.
A man noticed something gradual and wrong happening between two trees in his front yard. They appeared to be closing the distance between them over time. One, he suspected, wasn't a natural tree at all. Supporting that unease was something birds seemed to have already worked out. Neither tree ever attracted them, not once, which he found deeply inconsistent with every other tree on the property. He tied a cord tightly between the trunks overnight as a measuring test. By morning, the cord had visibly drooped, suggesting the gap had narrowed while he slept. Some viewers watching his documentation proposed the location might sit above or beside something functioning as a portal.
Look at it blowing in the wind. Look at this. I had this thing so tight. Look at this droop. This thing definitely moved.
Home visitor. A security camera mounted outside a collector's home recorded something emerging from the shadows that had no straightforward explanation attached to it. The figure stopped and appeared to direct its attention toward the interior of the property, remaining still for an uncomfortable stretch of time. The owner, concerned about his collection, passed the footage to authorities for examination. What the camera had captured showed two large, dark eyes dominating a small and poorly defined facial structure, with the rest of the body remaining indistinct against the surrounding darkness. Nothing about its appearance matched anything familiar. Whatever had been standing outside that home, studying its contents, left no answer behind. Rain wall.
It is rain.
A woman filming outside in San Diego watched something approach her that behaved unlike any rainfall she had witnessed before. From down the street, a distinct wall of rain moved toward her, not falling uniformly from above, but advancing horizontally, like a curtain being drawn across the road. The dry ground where she stood remained dry as she filmed, the boundary between wet and untouched pavement moving closer with each passing second. Then it reached her, and the street around her changed completely in an instant. The visual of rain approaching as a defined moving edge, rather than simply arriving from above, produced something that looked considerably more deliberate than weather has any right to appear. Chinese ritual. A video uploaded by a Chinese man spread rapidly after viewers struggled to find any satisfying explanation for what it showed. Plastic bowls and chairs on the ground around him moved without being touched, responding apparently to hand gestures he made nearby. He then demonstrated what appeared to be the method a fire-based ritual performed with deliberate movements. The objects moved again. Some people landed firmly on black magic. Others insisted it was an elaborate setup, pointing toward hidden mechanisms. Neither camp managed to produce an explanation convincing enough to fully close the debate. The footage kept circulating precisely because whatever was moving those objects did so in a way that resisted every framework people tried placing around it. Main tree. Something happened in Bar Harbor, Maine in August 2021 that drew immediate crowds and cameras. A palm tree hung in midair above the street, with nothing visibly supporting it from below or above. People gathered and filmed from multiple angles, attempting to locate the mechanism. Online viewers suggested a large crane used for tree relocation might account for the sight, which was a reasonable enough proposal. Those who had been standing there in person pushed back against how simple that explanation felt against the actual experience of watching it. For the duration it remained airborne, the tree looked less like something being transported and more like something that had simply decided gravity no longer applied to it. Fire tornado. Footage of a ritual connected to the Brazilian religion, Umbanda, showed something happening with fire that indoor environments are not designed to produce. Candles burned beside a small altar carrying miniature figures, and a cross when the flames began behaving differently, gathering and spinning into a vortex that rose and tightened inside the room. The spiral shifted color as it moved, cycling between orange and blue before gradually settling and disappearing. When it was gone, nothing on the altar showed any sign of heat damage. That detail unsettled people more than the vortex itself. A fire tornado forming indoors under any circumstances challenges easy explanation. One that burns with that intensity and leaves everything it surrounds completely untouched challenges considerably more than that. Bus girl. A man exploring a dense forest came across a bus that had been crashed and abandoned long enough for the surrounding vegetation to reclaim most of it. Moving closer, he noticed something inside that stopped him. A small girl sitting perfectly still among the decay, her stillness carrying a quality that felt wrong rather than simply quiet. Nothing about her presence made sense in that setting. He gathered enough composure to step inside and investigate further. She was gone. No sound of movement, no direction she could have gone, no evidence she had occupied that seat moments before. He stood inside the wreckage with nothing but the silence and the unsettling certainty that something had been sitting there watching him approach. Snowflame. At Rusutsu Resort in Japan, something caught the attention of a visitor on the snow-covered slopes, a small flame appearing and vanishing repeatedly in the same spot, too consistent to be accidental and too brief to examine properly. The immediate assumption pointed towards sparks from an exposed electrical cable, making contact with nearby trees. When investigators checked the area, however, no electrical wiring was found anywhere close to the location. The absence of any identifiable source turned what had seemed like a straightforward maintenance issue into something that produced more questions than the original sighting had. A flame appearing repeatedly in a snowy mountainside with no fuel and no source has no simple entry in any standard reference. Doorway figure. A woman alone in her San Jose home in 2016 caught a shadow passing briefly across a doorway and called out, assuming her husband had returned early. Silence answered her. The unease that followed pushed her to start recording as she moved toward the door to check. When she eased it open, a pale face appeared at the edge of the frame, leaning into view with a blank expression and eye movement that communicated nothing recognizable. She left the house immediately. When her husband arrived later, they searched every room and every possible entry point together. Nobody had been inside. Whatever had leaned through that doorway to look at her had left no trace of having been there at all. Light pole. A clip began spreading online that presented itself as ordinary street footage until the detail at its center registered properly. Two pale arms extended from a street light pole, jutting outward and holding position with a rigidity that didn't suggest performance or costume. They looked real in a way that props rarely achieve. Theories online ranged from a skinwalker using the pole as inadequate cover to something trapped inside, attempting to signal outward. The person who uploaded the footage added that the pole had twitched on at least one occasion while they watched it. Whether that detail is accurate or not, the arms alone were sufficient to ensure that particular stretch of street would not be walked past casually by anyone who had seen the clip. Roadside blob. A man walking along a road late at night noticed something sitting at the edge of the pavement that he initially dismissed as discarded rubbish. Then it moved. The mass twisted and stretched upward with a fluid, boneless quality that placed it firmly outside any familiar biological category. It had the appearance of something gelatinous and alive, operating according to rules that standard creature anatomy doesn't follow. He filmed it and posted the footage online, hoping someone in the comments might recognize what he had found. Nobody did. Every response added a new theory without bringing the thread any closer to a conclusion, and the creature itself remained entirely unidentified. Mirror shadow.
There's no way there could be someone standing there.
A young woman named Fizana was checking her reflection before leaving home when something in the background of the mirror pulled her attention. A dark figure stood behind her, shaped like a person, but behaving differently. When she moved her arms, it didn't follow.
I'm just gonna put up my hand here.
The face visible beneath the darkened upper portion appeared pale, its eyes carrying a complete blackness that the surrounding shadow couldn't fully account for. She posted the footage, and viewers responded with immediate concern. Her reply to those warnings unsettled people further. The figure hadn't appeared for the first time that day. It had been showing up for a while already, standing behind her in reflective surfaces, watching without mirroring. Racing field. An anonymously posted clip with no accompanying context showed a fiery object moving across an open field at a speed that left burning grass in its wake. The footage carried no identifying information about location, date, or source. Theories arrived in volume, a rare atmospheric phenomenon never previously captured. A supernatural entity composed entirely of fire. Sophisticated video editing designed to generate exactly this kind of debate. Skeptics pushed firmly toward the editing explanation and stayed there. Others found the movement and the burning trail too physically consistent to dismiss as constructed. The clip remained online without resolution, holding its place in a particular category of footage that never quite gets explained and never quite goes away. Being watched. A man living alone began noticing something wrong in his home after returning late one night, a persistent and specific feeling of being observed that didn't diminish with time or logic. It followed him through every room at every hour, lasting across an entire week without offering any identifiable source. He started keeping his phone recording through the night, reasoning that whatever his instincts kept registering might eventually show up on camera. One night, he woke suddenly with the feeling sharpened into certainty. He checked the room and later reviewed the footage. What the recording had captured during those sleeping hours suggested his instincts had been accurate all along. Something had been in that room with him. Face-peeling man.
Playing, it was a mask. It was a fight.
Footage from Milwaukee showed a man approaching two people on a street in a way that produced immediate discomfort before anything specific could be identified. As the distance closed, the detail that had been generating that discomfort became visible. The skin around his ears appeared to be separating from his head, peeling away from the sides of his face while he walked. He told the witnesses he was attempting to remove a mask. The explanation raised more questions than it answered. Viewers who examined the footage closely argued the mask read as too realistic to be cosmetic. If it was a mask, the construction was extraordinary. If it wasn't, then what was peeling away from that man's face as he calmly walked toward strangers remained something nobody could comfortably answer.
It was a mask. It was a fight.
Cube cloud. A person in the UK filmed something in the sky that didn't behave the way clouds are supposed to. Among the ordinary formations drifting overhead, one stood apart a near-perfect cube shape, separate from everything around it, appearing almost detached from the sky it occupied. One face of it caught sunlight and reflected it cleanly, giving it a geometric precision that atmospheric moisture has no business producing on its own. The shape matched the kind of basic cube sketch anyone draws as a child, which made its appearance up there feel less like coincidence and more like something using familiar geometry as cover. Giant cockroach. A hiker moving through the forest near Ithaca, New York, came across something in the snow that made him immediately reconsider his route. A cockroach of extraordinary size was crossing the ground ahead, moving on its legs with a slow and deliberate quality that felt less like foraging and more like patrol. He kept his distance and filmed rather than approaching, his instincts registering something territorial about how it moved through that particular stretch of trees. He eventually changed direction, partly to continue searching for his dog, and partly because the encounter had produced a quiet but persistent question about what else might be occupying that forest at a similarly unexpected scale. Boiling Lake. Deep in remote Mongolia sits a lake that local tradition describes as actively hostile toward human presence. The old accounts claim its surface begins boiling the moment anyone draws near, spilling outward as though registering the approach as a threat. Scientists point toward underground gases or sound-based vibrations as responsible for the behavior. Locals don't find those explanations complete. Footage that appears to support the legend shows water bursting suddenly from a dry ravine with extraordinary force, surging toward people standing nearby who barely cleared the path in time. Whether underground pressure produced that surge on its own schedule or something older, responded exactly as the stories always said, it would remain genuinely unresolved. Glowing crack. A man walking his neighborhood at night spotted something glowing ahead that pulled him forward even as it unsettled him. Closing the distance revealed something hovering in the air that resembled a crack opening in the darkness itself, iridescent, shimmering, floating, without any visible anchor above or below it. The sight was simultaneously compelling and deeply wrong. What made the encounter more frustrating than frightening in retrospect was what didn't happen next. He didn't approach it closely, didn't test its edges, didn't attempt any interaction that might have produced additional information. He filmed from a distance, and the mystery stayed exactly that size. Crushed door. Footage that circulated online claimed to have originated inside a classified laboratory setting. A woman in a hospital gown stood alone in a bare room facing a heavy metal vault door. She raised her hands, and the door responded, sliding forward and then crumpling inward as though struck by a force the camera couldn't identify. No contact was made. The woman simply directed her attention toward the door.